Right, hey guys, how are we doing? So, just a quick one. I usually upload 2 videos every day. If that's not the case for today and tomorrow, it's because it's my birthday today, and I want to go out and enjoy that. So, I'll record this, and then hopefully maybe one video tomorrow, and then we should be back to the two. I want to go see my family and friends for my birthday. But anyway. MUSHOKU Tensei Season 2, this episode was phenomenal. I cried my eyes out at the end of it, and it's just something else. The animation was absolutely fantastic. Getting back into that high-octane action again from Season 1 was just, like, so cool to see. The interaction with all the characters, so much emotion going into it. And then, what happened with Paul, goddamn, and then the reveal with his mum at the end. Goddamn, so much emotions getting thrown around. But let's see what was potentially left out from the original source material.
From the animation and atmosphere,
Mate, it felt so tense. It felt so tense. The voice acting was spot on as well. Paul kicked so much ass.
to the voice acting and music,
んなことは俺だって分かってんだよ。母親を見つけた時の態度がそれかって言ってんだ。やめろ。
everything about this episode was pretty much perfect.
Yeah, it was absolutely phenomenal. I loved it so much. I was saying to people at work were laughing at me. I was like, I watched this anime yesterday and I was crying my eyes out. They were like, shut up. No, you didn't. No.
What is there then to talk about? Well, aside from some explanations for Rudy's peculiar behavior, there's the interesting details behind the way they fought the Hydra, Paul's own perspective on the way things turned out, and most importantly, the question of why. They're all valuable additions that make an already amazing episode better, so as I go through the best episode of Season 2 so far,
It really
here's
is.
how this epic fight with the Hydra went in the novels.
Cool.
Episode 46, Parents, covering chapters 8 to 11 from volume 12 of the light novel.
How mad was it as well that, like, it aired on Father's Day?
With the last teleporter being right in front of them, preparation was the most important thing right now. That meant taking stock of supplies, which in turn led Rudy to taking those advanced tier healing scrolls from Roxy.
Right, yeah.
They were an emergency precaution just in case his throat or lungs got crushed like last time. He was
Oh.
also given a magically imbued crystal from Alina Lise, which was essentially a mana pot for if he or Roxy ran out. It wasn't something Rudy was particularly concerned with, but when exploring a labyrinth, magicians ran out of mana all the time,
Oh, okay.
especially if the boss room was one of the arena types. This meant once you entered, you couldn't leave, so unless you were ready to slay the boss as is, it was always best to ensure you were as prepared as possible for it.
I mean, yeah, they were lucky in the case then that they were able to just keep dipping out and going back in.
Now, aside from the wonder of being face to face with a Hydra, what intrigued Rudy more was the condition of Zenith. It wasn't a worried panic like how we saw with Paul though, but rather a more confused how did she get there type look.
Well, yeah.
His first thoughts
I was I was like, wait a minute, why is she okay? Why has she been kept there like that? Like, yeah.
weren't of concern or how do we save her, but instead a series of questions asking why. How was it that Zenith ended up inside this crystal, and why was it that she was all the way down here being guarded by this Hydra? It's an interesting perspective I'll get more into soon, but for now, all you need to know is that this was what Rudy was thinking about.
And it's fair enough though, but like, because Paul's very much just like one track, right, there she is, I've been looking, let's go save her. Where Rudy's got more of a thought process going on with stuff, and he's asking very legit questions.
There were so many doubts behind the plausibility of all this happening by chance. It was before Rudy could express any of them, though, that Paul would charge in and Rudy be forced to engage. Since he wanted to end the fight in only one hit, what he charged up was a stone cannon on par with this one. A projectile
yeah.
strong enough to obliterate the body of the immortal Demon King.
Body
Unfortunately,
Guardio, whatever
it
his name
wasn't
is.
strong enough to pierce this Hydra's defenses,
Because
so
of the mana
as we saw in
shield.
the anime, the only person capable of that was Paul. His movements were so fast that even Rudy's Eye of Foresight couldn't keep up, and his technique refined to the point that even if he didn't cut through a head in one slice, he would flip his body and use the centrifugal
Second one
force
again.
from it to ensure he
Boom.
made the cut the second
So
time.
cool.
Both swords seemed perfect for the job, but to add a little context as to why this shorter one was better, it's because it was a magic item imbued with the highly rare steel cutting ability. This meant the harder the exterior of the opponent Paul was up against, the sharper his sword would become and the easier it would be to slice through. It was an amazing weapon that scaled in power proportionally to an enemy's durability.
Wow.
That also meant it was extremely dull when trying to cut softer things, but that's actually
That's
the
an
reason why
interesting
Paul was
concept,
even
love
able
it.
to secure it. You see, when a merchant was demoing it by trying to cut through dried meat, his inability to slice any of it made it seem like the blade was useless.
Oh.
Paul, of course, recognized it as that extremely rare steel-cutting ability, so that was enough for him to step in and purchase
That's
it.
brilliant. That's
It was
so
a bargain
cool.
buy he secured for literal pennies, making it an impressive find whose true value was shining now.
Mate.
Since the Hydra's scales were very clearly tough, that made Paul's sword the perfect tool against them. It's just that
That's
at this
so
point there
cool.
wasn't any strategy, and Paul's reckless behavior was putting his support in danger. The injury she received was actually a lot more sizable than what we saw in the anime, but nothing too severe that basic tier healing magic couldn't fix. From the way Rudy described it, it was a deep laceration that would have required dozens of stitches back in the old world, one that came just from a slight graze with the Hydra's razor-sharp exterior. That made it clear that getting close was dangerous, since if the lightest touch was enough to cut you open, those incapable of defending would be sliced to ribbons. It was an important concern that definitely needed to be discussed, but Paul clearly didn't even register it.
No, not at
His
all.
focus on Zenith closed out the fact Alina Lise got hurt, and that didn't really sit too well with Rudy. I mean, yes, she was the party's tank, but just because taking damage was part of the job, that didn't mean that Paul should completely ignore her.
Yeah, it doesn't mean, yeah, okay, like, she could just take it, it's fine. I don't care, she gets hurt, that's her job.
It was a state of mind not beneficial to anyone. What bothered Rudy more than that, though, was once again that burning question of why. Reason being that there were quite a few things that just didn't make sense here. Like, even if you set aside the question of why Zenith got imprisoned here, how was it that she was teleported here to begin with, and how did Geese know that this was the condition she was stuck in? The former is a question that ties back to Rudy's research, and the latter refers to the peculiar wording Geese chose to use when describing Zenith. To focus on the former first, though, teleportation into a solid object wasn't something easily accomplished. Just like how you can't cast an offensive spell directly within a person's body, to transport a human into the earth itself was just as impossible. There was an insurmountable resistance between the mana at the destination and the mana in the person being teleported, one that made the two wholly incompatible with each other. That didn't mean that it was impossible, though, since Rudy did speculate that with an obscene amount of mana, it probably could be done. So, as unlikely as it was for Zenith to be teleported right into this crystal, it wasn't impossible so long as enough mana was used. This makes me wonder whether Zenith was actually teleported here or not, since with her being the only case of teleportation like this, perhaps it wasn't the incident that had sent her here.
Yeah,
Perhaps another factors at play and we're just getting looped in now.
I think there's some other foul play here. Some things within the background. Some schemes.
Either way, I'm sure it's something that'll be answered later. Now, as for how Geese knew that she was captured like this, well, it was this choice of wording that made him seem suspicious too. What I mean is that it implied he knew this was the state she was in without anyone ever coming here.
Curious.
An impossible scenario considering that no one has made it here. His story was that she was found by adventurers, but if that was true, then how did they get all the way here, make it back, and tell Geese about it? It's pretty obvious that they didn't, so something about the way Geese framed his information just wasn't adding up anymore.
Oh dear, no.
It was enough of a mystery that Rudy knew he needed to ask about it later. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see any of that in the anime, but that's the situation as is with all the smaller bits and details.
Oh, I want the next episode, because there's going to be so much emotions being thrown around. I'll really just get angry with Geese and just be like, you tell me what you actually know.
To switch back to the problem at hand now, though, the Hydra here wasn't one of the 3 confirmed living versions in the world right now. In the Demon Continent, there was the white, gray, and gold scale ones, but the one guarding Zenith had green scales. It was a fabled monster whose last recorded presence was during the Second Great Human-Demon War,
God.
a period of time from over 5,000 years ago. Legends say they were annihilated when the continent was split, but clearly that wasn't true given the one standing
one
right
there.
in front of them. So, this was a monster Rudy knew him and his party were very much outmatched by. so much so that he actually felt it was best to retreat and to create a more specialized party. It was unlikely they'd find anyone whose specialty was the Hydra, but if there was at least one other person who could slice cleanly through the Hydra's neck, that alone would have made the fight significantly easier. It's just too bad that Rudy knew Paul wouldn't allow it. Given the state he was currently in, even if Rudy did leave and took everyone else with him, he knew Paul would have stayed behind and fought the Hydra solo.
By himself, yeah, definitely.
That's just how committed he was to ending this problem now. So, before we get more into how they're going to handle it, for a bit more context on Rudy's impartial behavior towards Zenith, a large part of it was actually because he'd already given up on her. That's a bit more blunt than how the novel put it, but what Rudy was expecting was literally nothing. He knew the odds of her surviving were minimal to begin with, so in the years she'd been gone, he'd prepared himself for the worst. Like, he didn't expect to find any trace of her, let alone her body. It's how I assume he was able to calmly question whether she was alive or not. This obviously wasn't appropriate given who she was to him, but as we saw in the anime, Zenith was less his mother and more just this person he happened to live with. A likely product of how he perceived interpersonal relationships at the time. Now, the most important thing prior to going back in was determining a formation and setting everyone's roles in it. Reason being that, with Paul being the only one capable of beheading and Rudy being the only one capable of cauterizing, ensuring both could do their jobs uninterrupted was absolutely essential. This meant Alina Lise and Tallhand would have to be decoys, and Roxy would need to stay at the back and act as their healer. The result was an arrangement known as the Imperial Cross Formation.
Imperial
In
Cross
the anime,
Formation, that's so
prominent,
cool.
but as you'll soon see, it's actually a major part in how they were able to defeat the Hydra. They were significantly more organized than how they looked here. To finish off this conversation first though, Paul's statement to Rudy wasn't at all as cruel as you might think it was. As absurd as it is to hear your own parents say to fight to the death, the message being sent wasn't so much the literal words of what he was saying, but rather the genuine conviction behind it. What I mean is that, by Paul saying what he did, he was displaying in full the trust he had for Rudy. Since his own determination would have him save Zenith at the cost of his own life, the fact he expected the same from Rudy meant he was thinking of him as an equal here.
Okay.
He was seeing Rudy for the adult he was and showing he believed in him just as much as he believed in himself. A message intent on getting Rudy to share the same determination as his own. He didn't actually want Rudy to die, since to save Zenith and lose Rudy in the process was, in his own words, completely nonsensical. Paul genuinely wanted to save everyone. He just needed Rudy to see how much he respected him first. Now, the anime portrayed the fight amazingly in its own way, but that Imperial Cross Formation wasn't something you'd know they were actively doing.
Right, okay.
So, it was Paul in front, handling one head at a time, Alina Lise and Tallhand on either side serving as both decoys and defense,
Okay.
Rudy right behind Paul so he could cauterize immediately, then Roxy behind him to provide heals for everyone. It was an optimized formation that took advantage of the Hydra's attack patterns.
What I thought was really cool, just to randomly throw in there, was when he's cauterizing all the Hydra heads, when the Hydra is nearly like one or two heads, no, maybe three, just decides to just like bite off part of the head that had the cauterization on it, so that it was just like a wound again, so that it could grow back. I was like, my god, that's brutal.
Since it typically only attacked with 3 heads at a time, this meant Alina Lise and Tallhand could parry one each, then that
Right,
left
and then
the
they go
other
for
for
the
Paul
other
and
one.
Rudy to
Right,
handle
cool
all on their own.
tactics, love it.
Occasionally it would swing a 4th head just to switch things up, but whether at Alina Lise or Tallhand, 2 heads at once weren't enough to overcome either of them. Even if either did get injured by a mistimed parry, Roxy would just run up, heal them, then return back to her position. They were a well-oiled machine, both highly methodical and organized,
Love it.
one whose sole purpose was to ensure that Rudy was protected. This allowed him to focus only on burning, and while the trust required to do so was immense, by the 3rd head, Rudy knew focusing on anything else was unnecessary. Alina Lise and Tallhand had proven he had nothing to worry about. Any head that got even
They're
remotely
very
close was
capable.
immediately deflected and quickly decapitated. So, for a while this strict regiment was working spectacularly.
But then the Hydra
It was when
starts
the group
flailing.
got the Hydra to 5 heads left, though, that once again it would switch things up. It had decided to attack with all 5 heads at once now. A focused charge directed straight towards Tallhand. He was able to dodge two and block another, but by the time the fourth came to attack two, there was nothing Tallhand could do to defend himself anymore. He was immediately grabbed just like how we saw in the anime, then about to be split in half by the incoming fifth head. Luckily, Paul was there to save him, but that was the real reason why Tallhand got grabbed like that. I assume it's because the Hydra identified him as the weakest. Fast forward now to the Hydra's trump card, and this was an attack known as Dragon's Breath, an ability strong enough to melt steel and evaporate a bog, yet one not so powerful as to get the best of Rudy. What Rudy had done with his magic here, he suspected would have taken the equivalent of 10 magicians or more. There were no ordinary magicians that could have defended the Hydra's attack like this. Rudy, as we know, wasn't ordinary though, but had the Hydra waited and used each head's Dragon Breath one after the other, a longer consecutive shot might have been more of a struggle for him.
Ooh.
Rudy didn't understand why it didn't, but what he did know was that once they were done, they couldn't use it again. It wasn't possible for the same head to fire Dragon's Breath in quick succession like that. So it was after this that Rudy would start to think that they'd won, but right as he was cauterizing the second to last head, once again the Hydra would do something different. It would flail its severed heads as if they were whips, a last-ditch move that was clearly the result of being driven into a corner. Rudy's Eye of Foresight made it clear that this was what was coming, but because he was so close to the Hydra's body, he couldn't understand what exactly it was doing. He was unable to comprehend the spiked weapons of destruction flying straight towards him.
Alright, yeah, okay.
Paul, on the other hand, knew this was exactly what was coming, so he was completely focused while Rudy was not.
Crazy.
In fact, he was so confident in the experience of everyone around him that he completely forgot Rudy was still a rookie in the labyrinth. Whereas him, Tallhand, and Alina Lise knew to avoid this one last attack, Rudy simply didn't, and that's how he was caught. It was a lack of experience that unfortunately proved to be fatal. That's when Rudy would finish the job with Stone Cannon, but not without costing him his arm first.
That was so cool.
You see, since the Hydra's
I was like, what is Rudy going to do? As soon as he just grabbed its eye and then just blows, oh my god!
Scales covered its eyelids too. Just the act of blinking sliced straight through him. The rest was the Hydra's muscles snapping his bone apart. It was once Rudy came to his senses after this that his playback of what happened revealed why Paul got hit. Long story short, it was essentially a matter of Paul being too skilled. You see, a kick this strong would have sent any normal person reeling back from the recoil. Because Paul was someone who could fight with battle aura though, the recoil which should have moved his own body out of the way too, was no longer present and instead kept him stationary. It had made it so where Rudy was before was exactly where he ended up. Now, as for what Paul thought about all this, his only thought was to save Rudy. The moment he saw Rudy was in trouble, his reaction was immediate and without any thought for what came next. The rest was him taking in the aftermath, but right as he would try and ask for healing too, his inability to do so combined with the looks on everyone's faces revealed the somber fact that he was dying. Now, here's where I'd usually go over what his last thoughts were too, but the CD drama does such a great job conveying them that I'm just gonna go ahead and play that instead. It'll also serve as the end of the video, so if you enjoyed what you saw and want to see more, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. But now, try not to cry too much.
Oh no.
俺は死ぬのか。せめてゼニスが生きてるかどうかだけでも確認したかったな。それだけじゃねえ。ノルンやアイシャにもまた会いたかった。学校通ってんだっけか。大きくなったかな。リーレはどんな顔すっかな。迷惑ばっかかけたけど泣いてくれっかな。畜生、未練だらけだ。死にたくねえ。まだやりたいことたくさんあるのによ。父さん。でもまあいっか。ルディが死ぬよりはよ。元気でな。
ciao. Damn. God damn. That episode was phenomenal. It was only a matter of time before things started going wrong for Rudy. And it's one of those weird ones, because I looked on the comments on Crunchyroll, and it's like, the man god told Rudy not to go. So if Rudy hadn't have gone, would Paul still be alive? Would Roxy be okay? Ah! God damn. But yeah, like I said, it's my birthday today, so I apologise for there not being as many videos as normal. But give it a couple of days, we'll be back to the normal routine. Thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video, I want to be able to watch patron-only reactions, such as the original Dragon Ball series. Links in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month is all I ask to help support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thanks for that. And thank you all for watching. Yes, think of that, guys. Click like, subscribe, and leave comments down below. Let me know that I should watch discuss in future videos, and click that join button to watch my videos early. And I will see you guys, next time.